the den of iniquity. Vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment. What's a pity? Tomorrow never certain. What draws behind the curtain? The face of evil's lurking with that shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble that either pop or topple. Many will fall and stumble. Let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso. Cannons could reach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.
Yo, 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 Dr. Thunder, how's it going? Oh, I see that, ladies and gentlemen, in the chat and listening, I welcome to another episode of Getting Ish Done with the Ike and Dr. Thunder. And let's get one thing out of the way. Go ahead and click that like button, click the subscribe button, and click the notification bell as well. Today, we're going to be continuing the conversation that we started a couple of weeks ago, okay? On this show, which is all about production, all about getting things done and whatnot, we talked about some of the factors of production, shall we say, and how to leverage those. And we were on the point of leveraging yourself, your accountability, your, the entrepreneur in this case being the factor being leveraged, okay? And how being accountable, putting your neck on the line, if you will, is one of the cheapest ways of going about to gain leverage out there in the market. Right? And other things as well surrounding leverage and how to do it in utilize technology, for example, utilize YouTube, for example. This is a form of leverage, right? This is something that it's not necessarily capital on our part. We put it in the time, equity, but we're using other people's networks, leveraging in this manner, right? To get the word out there. And you guys are clicking the like button. You guys are sharing and whatnot. So how's it going, Dr. Thunder?
It's all right, man. How you doing?
I'm not bad. I am not bad at all. It is nice and hot out here in California, but it's a dry heat, as people like to emphasize from time to time. And
yeah,
sometimes
I was just out in Vegas for the Freedom Fest, and it was 111 degrees when I left. And I don't know what a dry heat is. It just seems like it's hot, like too hot, hot for no reason. And
dry heat is something that some people like to mention, but baking cookies also takes dry heat. So
right.
It's not like the dry heat is more forgiving or something.
Right.
It's just
toast uses dry heat.
Exactly. I guess it's just saying rather than at least I'm not being boiled. I'm being air fried. All right. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're gonna continue this conversation which I was talking about, okay? And this is on the Naval podcast, okay? That's the item we're going to be reviewing, we're going to be sharing today, right? And we're going to continue from where we stopped, okay? We got sidetracked last time we started this because when he was talking about using your name as leverage, he then went into Donald Trump and how Donald Trump got some blowback using the fact he's talking about the expense, if you will, of putting your name out there, putting your brand out there, the entrepreneur part of the factors of production that you're leveraging. And then we went down a rabbit hole, if you recall, from Donald Trump into politics and all the other usual places you might expect that would lead, right?
Yeah.
All right. Shout out to KS Rain, Dollar Will in the building, Little Rock in the building. I believe Just Call Me Brian is also here. So without further ado, we're going to continue from where we left off. All right, let us go.
Accountability is quite important. When you're working to build a product, or you're working in a team, or you're working in a business, we are constantly drummed into our heads how important it is to be.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to perform some
I
magic.
think you can get rid of the echo by muting yourself
Yeah.
every time you play.
Part of a team, and absolutely agree with that. A lot of our training socially is telling
It's good now, right?
Yep.
Okay.
us to not stick our necks out of the crowd. There's a saying that I hear from my Australian friends that like the tall poppy gets cut, right? Don't stick your neck out. But I would say that actually a really, really well-functioning team is small and has clear accountability for each of the different portions. Like, so you can say, okay, this person is responsible for building the product. This person is responsible for the messaging. This person is responsible for raising money. This person is responsible for the pricing strategy and maybe the online advertising. So if somebody screws up, you know exactly who's responsible, while at the same time something goes really well, you also know exactly who's responsible. So if you have a small team and you have clearly delineated responsibilities, then you can still keep a very high level of accountability. And accountability is really important because when something succeeds or fails, if it fails, everybody points fingers at each other. And if it succeeds, everybody steps forward to take credit. And we've all had that experience when we were in school and we got like a group assignment to do, and there were people in there were probably a few people in there who did a lot of the work, and then there were a few people who just did a lot of grandstanding or positioning to do the work. So we're all familiar with this from a childhood sense, but it is uncomfortable to talk about. But clear accountability is important. Without accountability, you don't have incentives. Without accountability, you can't build credibility. But you take risk. So you take risk of failure, you take risk of humiliation, you take risk of failure under your own name, which, luckily in modern society, there's no more debtor's prison and people don't go to jail or get executed for losing other people's money. But we're still socially hardwired to not fail in public.
Well, you want to bring back debtor's prison?
No.
Okay. I thought you were, All right.
No, well, I was advocating for it, but it was only in jest.
Gotcha. See, there's an interesting point here about what he's saying with regards to accountability. But maybe I'll let him talk a little bit more. And by accountability, I mean the failure aspect, which is, and it's tied to the debtor's prison. Allowing people to take risk and then fail, and then still come back and try again, is a culture that exists in certain aspects or certain segments of the economy. Let's say in tech, for example, where you're supposed to have a few startups, right? You're supposed to try a few times. Things are supposed to not quite work out, and then you're supposed to kind of just move around it. But that is actually quite necessary in order to incentivize people to go out there and solve problems, right? Otherwise, things will not get done. But let us continue.
Under our own names. And the people who have the ability to fail in public under their own names actually gain a lot of power. For example, I'll give a personal anecdote. Up until about 2013, 2014, my public persona was entirely around startups and investing. And only around 2014, 2015 did I start talking about philosophy and psychological things and broader things. And it made me a little nervous because I was doing it under my own name. And there were definitely people in the industry who sent me messages through the back channel like, what are you doing? You're ending your career. This is stupid. And I just went with it. I took a risk. Same with crypto early on. I took a risk. But when you put your name out there, you take a risk with certain things, you also get to reap the rewards. You get the benefits. Accountability is important because that's how you're going to get leverage. That's how you're going to get credibility. It's also how you're going to get equity. You're going to get a piece of the business when you're negotiating with.
And I think what he's stating here is pretty simple and clear, but so it's not forgotten. The point is, if something succeeds, right? If there was no accountability in the process, right? If there was no clearly delineated roles, then you don't know whom actually should get the credit, right? There is no reward coming from there, right? If you have this kind of, everything is by committee, everything is, we're all going to share the rewards evenly. There's no star players and all that kind of stuff. Or I think that it's either a no jerk policy or no assholes policy in certain HR departments these days. I think it's kind of big in academia based on what I hear, right? I don't know how widespread in terms of academia, but this idea of, we're not going to allow any of these lone wolf star player types come in here. We want to keep everything egalitarian and peaceful, blah, blah, blah. The point is, people are not necessarily incentivized, at least the right types of people are not incentivized to do crap in that situation, where it's like there was no accountability, there are no clear roles. When things go right, no one knows why it went right, and when things go wrong, no one knows what it went wrong either. And I don't know if you have any comment about that.
Yeah, so you know, it kind of makes my ears perk up a little bit. That whole thing about the egalitarian thing and no star players. You know, I had one of the administrators years ago when I was just advocating for my area, which is why they hired me, suggested that I was not supposed to, be such an advocate for my area, but that I needed to, be more, about the whole school and not just about my area, which is totally ridiculous because I knew exactly what everybody else, all the other area heads were doing. Mm-hmm. They were positioning their area for whatever benefit, whatever additional, more face time with the director, more face time with, the person that's making the decisions on who gets the money. They were doing all that stuff, but then on the other hand, they're telling folks, no, don't do that. You shouldn't do that. You should be more, as you put it, egalitarian. You should be more, spread the wealth. It's all the community. It's, this is here for all of us. You're supposed to be more like that, which I thought was really interesting because, even from the mouth of the person that was saying it, I knew a bunch of the stuff that they were doing and had done historically. Garbage, so I always I smell a rat when people start talking like that, because you're only a fool would seek to take away whatever sort of advantage that they may have. So as they're telling you to eliminate your advantage, they are saying that they're eliminating their advantage, but actually they're probably doubling and tripling down on their advantage.
100%, especially if, for example, to paint the worst type of situation, if their particular advantage is usurpation of credit from other people.
Oh yeah.
Right? If that's their particular advantage, then they got the game sewn up telling you to be egalitarian, right? Go ahead.
That's right. Absolutely. That's 100%. And it's totally disingenuous. And when you're first coming into an organization and you don't know the politics, you don't know a lot of the kind of clever stuff that people learn as they've been doing it for a while. That's a highly effective technique. You convince those that don't have very much experience with the organization to subdue their own interests, and then you'll gain some cachet that way because they'll be spreading some of their advantage to you, albeit just a little bit, while you are steady doubling down on your own advantage, and so you get to benefit two ways. Eventually, of course, people, unless they're totally, no, I'm not going to give it that. I know folks that have been, faculty members for, forever, and they still are buying in to that whole egalitarian stuff. I still hear them saying that. Not only are they saying it, trying to fool other people. I don't know that they're really trying to fool anybody. I think they've totally bought into that. But they're stuck at the place that they are. They'll never get, they'll never advance from where they are. And they've been. All right, ladies and gentlemen,
click that like button as you come in. All right. And share the stream. Okay. Because we're talking about something very important with regards to doing things, getting things done. And that is that accountability works. Clear, delineated roles and responsibilities work. The secret to a good new startup, a secret to a good marriage even, is people have clear roles okay, their little fiefdoms, their ego can be satisfied in there. They can put their sweat equity in there, and they can reap the rewards, right? And be held accountable. This is the only way that you can actually have a functioning organization, right? With different parts and pieces. It's almost like saying, okay, I'm going to make a car. Okay, the car has different parts and pieces that kind of function, right? But rather you say, oh no, I think we need more glass, right? Just so it's more egalitarian. I think we need to add more weight in glass. And let's make sure we're getting equal amounts of rubber. And it's like, bro, it's about the function, okay? Each part here serves a function. It's not just about representation and kumbaya and all that kind of stuff. Where it's like, oh, we all did it together. It's like, no, the windshield's job is to do something. The airbag's job is to do something. The airbag can't be pointing to the back seat when things go wrong in the airbag department. But anyways, ladies and gentlemen, let's continue here with this.
With other people, ultimately, if someone else is making a decision about how to compensate you, that decision will be based on how replaceable you are. And if you have high accountability, that makes you less replaceable. And then they have to give you equity, which is a piece of the upside. But equity itself is a good example, because equity is...
I just caught something that he said there, which is the more accountable you are, the harder it is to get rid of you. What does it mean? It means that when people know exactly what you're doing and what you're responsible for, and of course it's got to be important if it's an important function, such as the airbag, right? Then you can't just get rid of the airbag and replace it with, a carpet, right? It's like, no, that's the airbag. We know it's a good airbag, okay? And he's the best airbag around, and he's accountable for that particular function. It's not some kind of weird floating administrative function where, he's just kind of responsible for making sure everybody smiles in meetings or something like that. But where there's clear delineation. Now, the reason why I perked up my ears is because it's directly related to something that somebody told me a long time ago, which is you want to go close to the money. And typically what he was saying was about the responsibility of being clearly seen as somebody that is bringing in the dollars into an organization, right? When people see that accountability, basically saying performance-based type situation, right? When people see your performance, or in this case, he was talking about money, right? When people see you, that you're right there at the gateway of pulling out money from the client's pocket into the company's pocket, it's hard to get rid of you, because you're not just a light bulb, let's say, which is the other analogy that I used to, or the other example on the other extreme. A light bulb is a light bulb is a light bulb. I can get rid of him and put in another one. And that's your typical type of some technician, some just typical engineer, just some typical functionary, if you will, that is not highly accountable, that people can't say, what exactly do you do? Once you make it known what you do, right, it is hard for someone else to kind of dismiss you that way, right?
Yeah.
All right, ladies and gentlemen.
It's also a risk-based instrument. Equity means you get paid everything after all the people who need guaranteed money are paid back. So if you look at the hierarchy of capital in a company, the employees get paid first. They get to pay the salary first. Like in the legal proceedings, the salaries are sacrosanct. If you are a board member and the company spends too much money and has back salaries to pay, the government will go after you personally to pay back the salaries. So the employees get the most security, but in exchange for that security, they don't have as much upside. Then next in line would be the debt holders, who are maybe the bankers who lent money to the company for operations, and they need to make their fixed coupon every month or every year, but they don't get much more upside beyond that. Now, they might be making 5, 10, 15, 20, 25% a year, but that's where their upside is limited to. And then finally are the equity holders. And these people are actually going to get most of the upside. So once the debt holders are paid off and the salaries are paid off, whatever remains goes to them. But if there isn't enough money to pay off the salaries and the debt holders, or if there's just enough to pay off the salary and the debt holders, which is what happens with most businesses most of the times, the equity holders get nothing. So the equity holders take on greater risk, but then they take on, in exchange, they get nearly unlimited upside. And you can do the same with all of your work. So essentially, taking accountability for your actions is the same as taking an equity position in all of your work. You're essentially taking greater downside risk and greater upside risk. But realize that in modern society, the downside risk is not that large. Even personal bankruptcy can wipe the debts clean. in good ecosystems, I'm most familiar with Silicon Valley, but generally people will forgive failures as long as you were honest and made a high integrity effort. So there's not really that much to fear in terms of failure. And so people should be taking on a lot more accountability than they actually are.
Is accountability actually fragile, or do you really just mean that we're hardwired not to fail in public, so it just feels like it's a fragile thing?
I think it could actually be fragile. Like example of accountability is you're an airplane pilot. As a captain, you're taking on accountability for the entire plane. Let's say that something goes wrong with the aircraft, you can't later blame it on anyone else. You can't blame it on the steward or the stewardess. You can't blame it on the co-pilot. You're the captain. You're responsible for the ship. And if you screw up, you crash the ship and there are immediate consequences. In the old days, the captain was expected to go down with the ship. If the ship was sinking, literally the last person who got to get off was the captain. So yeah, I think accountability does come with real risks, but we're talking about in a business context. The risk here would be that you would probably be the last one to get your capital back out. You'd be the last one to get paid for your time. So, the time that you put in, the capital that you put into the company, these are what are at risk. Even if a business fails and your name's on it, that's not as bad as if it turns out to be an integrity issue. Like your Bernie Madoff, for example, Madoff Investments. That name is never going to be good again in the investment community. You could be Bernie Madoff's great-great-great-grandson. You are not going to go into the investment business because you ruin the family name. So I think these days, the accountability risk with the name happens more around integrity rather than it does around purely economic failure.
The big takeaway for me on accountability is that you will be rewarded directly in proportion with your accountability. I also think this is why people like Taleb rail against CEOs who get rewards without accountability.
As a matter of fact, there's some CEOs who get rewarded as a result of doing things that are completely antithetical to the sustainability of an actual company. But that's a different subject. It's about publicly traded companies and the types of things that, the ways in which they're incentivized, which is towards the shareholder, and the kinds of tricks, purely financial tricks, that they can play in order to make certain numbers look good for the shareholders. And CEOs get a whole bunch of money, which is not really real accountability, I guess. But I don't know. Is there anything you wanted to react to so far?
Yeah. So it made me think of a conversation I had with. It was a live stream I did with Larry Sharp when I was at the Freedom Fest, and I was at his booth there in the exhibit, in the sort of expo area, and he was talking about being willing to give people credit for their ideas and not taking credit for other people's ideas. And he was talking about an aspect of integrity. I asked him, why did he decide that? Because I interviewed Larry a couple times on Conversations with Dr. Thunder. Mm-hmm. In the second interview, in our interview, he intimated that he was not interested in running again because it's brutal. It's a really hard slog, and so of course he's running. He's the Libertarian candidate for governor of New York. And I asked him what changed. And he said, well, I always tell people that if you're trying to get people to do something, you're trying to convince people to do it and nobody does it, that means it's you. That means you are the one that does it. And so he couldn't convince anyone to run that he thought was viable to run for governor of New York. And so that's you. So that's so he took his own advice. But that whole accountability thing, I agree with what he's saying about there's a bigger penalty for failure when you're taking accountability, but there is a tremendous upside. And he represented, at least with respect to corporation formation and whatever, that there's an unlimited upside for those that have basically taken all the risk. So, yeah.
Indeed. Let us continue.
Yeah, I mean, tell that.
And by the way, again, super chat, right? Throw in a few dollars in the hat. Get the blood flowing here, okay? Fair exchange, as they say, is no robbery, right? This is all about. Let me not continue.
Skin in the Game is required reading if you want to get anywhere in modern life and understand how modern systems work. Then Skin in the Game would be near top of my list to read. But yes, accountability, skin in the game, these concepts go very closely hand in hand. I think of accountability as reputational skin in the game. It's putting your personal reputation on the line as skin in the game. Accountability is a simple concept. The only part of accountability that may be a little counterintuitive is that we're currently socially brainwashed to not take on accountability, not in a visible way. But I think there are ways to take on accountability where every member of a team can take on accountability for their portion. And that is how you get a well-functioning team while still putting credits and losses in the correct columns.
So why don't we talk a little bit about leverage? The first tweet in the storm was a famous quote from Archimedes, which was, "Give me a lever long enough and a place to stand, and I will move the earth." The next tweet was, "Fortunes require leverage. Business leverage comes from capital, people, and products with no marginal cost of replication."
Leverage is critical. The reason I stuck an Archimedes quote in there is normally I don't like putting other people's quotes in my Twitter. Like, that doesn't add any value. You can go look up those people's quotes. But this quote I had to put in there because it's just so fundamental. I read it when I was very, very young, and it had a huge impression on me. And we all know what leverage is when we use a seesaw or a lever. We understand how that works physically. But I think what our brains aren't really well evolved to comprehend is how much leverage is possible in modern society and what the newest forms of leverage are. And so the oldest form of leverage is labor, which is people working for you. So instead of me lifting rocks, I can have 10 people lift rocks. Then just by my guidance on where the rocks should go, a lot more rocks get moved than I could do myself. Everybody understands this because we're evolved to understand the labor form of leverage. And so what happens is society overvalues labor as a form of leverage. This is why your parents are impressed when you get a promotion and you have lots of people working underneath you. This is why when a lot of naive people, when you tell them about your company, they'll say how many people work there. They'll use that as a way to establish credibility.
Just didn't quite realize that all that behavior actually praises you not taking accountability. It's like, are you working for the man yet? Did the man give you a raise yet? Rather than, what have you done? Where's your name? Where's the credibility that you're, that kind of a thing. Interesting. That's a way to put it. But obviously, not everybody can go out there and be quote unquote putting their name on the dotted line and taking the risk and doing all that kind of stuff. As he mentioned, some people have to be parts of these teams, of a well-structured team where each person could take accountability, but still working for someone else, right? But the whole point of society and your parents constantly telling you and waiting for you to get slotted into some cog as a cog in someone else's machine actually is antithetical to the whole idea of pushing you out there, right? So that's interesting.
Yeah.
They're trying to measure how much leverage and impact you actually have. Or when someone starts a movement, they'll say how many people they have or how big the army is. We just automatically assume that more people is better. But I would argue that this is the worst form of leverage that you could possibly use. Managing other people is incredibly messy. It requires tremendous leadership skills. You're one short hop from a mutiny or getting eaten or torn apart by the mob. It's incredibly competed over. Entire civilizations.
Well, you've been dealing with some. Will it be mutinous?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. Been dealing with some mutiny.
Dude, I'll tell you. So it makes me think of both sides of this equation, right? So the leaders, the bosses that I've had that have been very good, and the ones that has had terrible leadership skills, and what that was like, and how sort of debilitating and stressful that it made stuff that was not necessary to be stressful, right? In learning how to actually hear what the boss actually means when they say something, so they might speak too quickly, they might speak out of frustration, and then you think, okay, well, let me wait for a while, and then they'll say actually what they mean after they've had a chance to, get a few cracks at it. The Office, everyone knows I love The Office. And Pam, very smartly, she would give Michael a couple tries at answering a phone call. She would, transfer calls to him, and she'd say, all right, Michael, such and such is on the phone. Here you go. And then he'd say some cornball thing, and she says, nope, it's still me. and then actually put him through, because she wanted him to get a shot to get the stupid stuff out, so then he could say something like like an adult, and so you have to kind of know that the people that are your boss they're human, and they have a bunch of other stuff they're dealing with. And I think the more you understand that, the maybe less stress will be involved in that. But then it also makes me think of like being a leader and the people that are under me. And so first, you don't want to replicate the things that irritated you about bosses that you had, right? So you want to try to use it as an opportunity to fix that, right? But secondly, it makes you know how the wrong employee can just like poison everything and make everything really terrible, and in situations where you have a lot of control, for instance, churches tend to be it's called at-will employment, so they don't have to even give you a reason for terminating. They can just say, hey, I didn't like that color shirt you had on, peace out. Now ordinarily they won't do that, because then that means they have to replace you, right? And it might be more trouble replacing you. And if you're actually doing a good job, there's still an incentive for them to keep you there, okay? But it makes it easier if somebody is really just not the right kind of person for a position for them to get rid of you. But there's other sorts of organizations, and one in particular that comes to mind. What are these kind of employees called? A lot of times they work in HR, civil servants.
Okay.
It is very, very difficult to get rid of a civil servant. Very, very difficult in these big organizations. And so you have to have the right reason, X, Y, and Z. And some folks you can't get rid of it at all. So consider academia. So somebody's got tenure. It's like, but they're terrible. Okay, so I mean, you'd be better off you go and finding another position than thinking that something's going to eliminate them, and then faculty members stay in their positions forever and ever. They're in there way too long. They should have retired 10 years ago. They still in there. It's like, when is this person going to retire? I can't stand this. Hey, that's what it is. And speaking of risk, there's a reason why some kinds of folks will pick positions that have more kind of job security, and what they'll exchange for that job security usually is money. So you hear a lot of teachers complaining about not getting paid very much. And it's like, well,
Yeah, you can't have it all. You cannot have everything. So regardless of which angle you're looking at it from, we're here noting the messiness of the labor leveraging, right?
Yeah.
So again, factors of production, land, labor, entrepreneur. You can leverage capital, which I called land a couple of seconds ago, right? You can leverage capital. You can leverage this accountability thing, which we talked about, which is the entrepreneur side, but also there's a leveraging of labor. But overall, leveraging of systems, rather than just, let's say, for example, you have two companies, right? Two architectural companies, two whatever, and then you just look and you ask, oh, well, if you try to measure which one is better, more efficient, or whatever, you don't know their earnings or anything, you just try to measure which is a better company by the number of employees, that would be generally wrong. Especially when you have, they're both, let's say, medium-sized companies and they're in the service sector. Just simply counting the heads in there could lead you astray, because you could have someone else that is, maybe they're using contractors and 1099, and also maybe they have a system, right, where they have this artificial intelligence and whatever else working for them, right? And that's why they're only a 3-man shop, but they're pulling in millions of dollars, while someone else has a whole bunch, has a union, has hired union labor. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but we know that that's going to be a tougher slog in that room in terms of the friction between management, ownership, and labor, if you will, right? But that no matter which way you look at it, labor is a messy thing. You're looking at, you talked about the leadership side. Are you a good leader or are you a bad leader? These are good followers or bad followers? What are all the things at will versus union, all that kind of stuff. So all that to say that labor is probably not the best thing to leverage in terms of things that are out there to leverage, right?
Hey,
Have been destroyed.
real quick here. So Dollar Will is saying that he says that, at will employment sucks. I'd agree. I tend to agree. But he says that's why he's pro-union. Now, here's the problem with pro-union. Okay? Now, look at the history of unions. Now, I did a show, Thunder's Thoughts. Something like, I can't remember the title. It was unions. Unions are not for black men, or black men aren't served by unions, or something. I can't remember what the title was, but it was a deep dive into unions, and in particular, I used musician unions as a sort of case study, or as a subject, I should say. And I talked about Chicago in particular, and how there was the musicians union, the white union, right, that in its charter had language specifically to exclude black people. And then even when they lifted that language, they still marginalized, did not serve black people. So it was required that another union be created, a black musicians union. Okay. And so, yeah. And, working as a musician, such a small percentage of what it is that I do is benefited at all by being part of a union. Now, I'm sort of forced to be part of a union because one of the bands that I play in frequently, which I didn't get that gig because I was in a union. I got it because they saw that I was a musician capable of doing what they wanted, and I had a relationship and network structure to facilitate that. Right. So I first started getting called for the gig because I was capable, and then actively I had to join this union and pay them part of my money for them to do nothing. right? But if you look at the history of unions, they've been not really good for black men, really good for black people. It's almost been a way to, it's like an organization that its goal is almost to disenfranchise black people. That's been the history of unions. I'm not going to suggest that there has never been a union that has in some ways benefited black people, but in general, they have not benefited us. And so that's one of the reasons that I don't trust organizations like that, because it gives them a lot of power. And then especially if they're going to just be basically using that power to be able to sort of circumvent, to be able to walk around us and find some other folks. Okay, this person, see, what it does is it allows them to be able to hire someone or promote someone that is not as capable as the person that's not in the union. Right? So anyhow, that's my yes, the problem with unions is the people in unions, and racism is a norm. I hear you saying that. It's like I'm saying though. I mean, if you look at the history of unions, I mean, it's riddled with all kinds of problems. So
yeah, and by the way, it's one of those things about. I'm not going to overcomplicate it. Okay.
No.
What the issues with union is the same issues that's attendant to what I call political solutions to things. By political, I mean group action, right?
That's right.
Whenever you have group action solutions, you can solve problems, but there's always going to be a unique set of problems that follow group action solutions, right? You can't get rid of it. You can't get rid of it. And it often involves people gaming things. And anyways, so that's the issue. Quite gameable when you do group action solution. So you can talk about the benefits all day, but don't forget that when you take group action, there's always some things that happen or that potentially could go wrong. And what is that rule? When something can go wrong, it will, right?
That's right. Murphy's Law.
Over this fight. For example, communism, Marxism is all about the battle between capital and labor, das Kapital and das Labor, right? So it's a trap. So you really want to stay out of labor-based leverage. You want the minimum amount of people working with you that are going to allow you to use the other forms of leverage, which I would argue are much more interesting. The second type of leverage is capital. And this one's a little less hardwired into us because large amounts of money moving around and being saved and being invested in money markets, these are inventions of human beings that last few hundred to few thousand years. They're not evolved with us from hundreds of thousands of years. So we understand them a little bit less well. They probably require more intelligence to use correctly, and the ways in which we use them keep changing. Management skills from 100 years ago might still apply today, but investing in the stock market skills from 100 years ago probably don't apply to the same level today. So capital is a trickier form of leverage to use. It's more modern. It's the one that people have used to get fabulously wealthy in the last century. It's probably been the dominant form of leverage in the last century. And you can see this by who are the richest people. It's bankers, politicians in corrupt countries who print money, essentially people who move large amounts of money around. And if you look at the top of very large companies, outside of technology companies, in many, many large old companies, the CEO job is really a financial job. They're really financial asset managers. Now, sometimes an asset manager can put a pleasant face on it, so you get a Warren Buffett type. But deep down, I think we all dislike capital as a form of leverage because it feels unfair, because it's this invisible thing that can be accumulated and passed across generations and suddenly seems to result in people having gargantuan amounts of money with nobody else kind of around them or necessarily sharing in it. That said, capital is a powerful form of leverage. It can be converted to labor. It can be converted to other things. It's very surgical, very analytical. If you are a brilliant investor and you have $1 billion and you can make a 30% return with it, whereas anybody else can only make a 20% return, you're going to get all the money and you're going to get paid very handsomely for it. it scales very, very well. If you get good at managing capital, you can manage more and more capital much more easily than you can manage more and more people. So it is a good.
We'll pause here, Capital. We're going to talk a little bit about something that Leroy has in the comment. And ladies and gentlemen, as you come in, click that like button, click the subscribe button if you've not already, click the notification bell as well, and share the stream. Also donate as we continue to converse, okay, about these important topics, okay? Now, with regards to capital and regards to what Leroy is asking about, Leroy is asking about how to leverage his capital with regards to retirement, savings, and all that kind of stuff. So this is a money talk that you're talking about. And it typically, I like one thing that he just mentioned, which is money scales very nicely, right? If you understand how to make certain maneuvers, if you can make it with $100, you can make it with $100,000, right? So it's nicely scalable. Not the same with labor, right? And not the same with other types of factors of production, if you will. But Leroy, you're 100% correct. It's about your lifestyle, right? Retirement, for example, is simply being able to do what you want to do when you want to do it, right? Being able to choose whatever the hell you want to do. So if there's some way of you finding some school bus in the middle of the woods somewhere, and somehow you're able to, your hunting skills and your hunting and trapping skills are such that you can go out there and live and you don't mind that, and that's your optimal lifestyle, boom. Then how much do you need for that, right? I don't know, but that is the question. Before you start looking at the capital and how to maneuver the capital, it's like, well, what exactly does this freedom look like for me? Like, what kind of resources do I need in order to live this freedom? Okay, because that's what retirement mainly is, right? Is let me do what the hell I want to do. Okay, so that is a key part of it. But then on just the raw numbers stuff, 6 months of income, I think is good for the emergency stuff. It's not a bad number to use. Okay, regardless of what your lifestyle is, 6 months of your income for emergency purposes is good. I then also believe that you should, you should have a certain amount of money that is disappearing away that you cannot see, that is going into some sacred account. And this is not for your retirement, and this is not for your 6 months of income either. This is a constant dripping away, just removal. Just put it away. Just hide it. Don't look at it. It could be $10 a week. It could be $100 a week. It could be $100,000 a week. I don't know what it is for you, but a tiny little bit of money that just disappears and it just goes away. Those are the things that you can, let's say you were doing that for the past 3 years. Okay. The market is super down now, right? That's the money, right? Because it's not scheduled for retirement, which is okay. I'm in a long haul, putting certain kinds of money away. I'm compounding it and all that. Or I have 6 months of worth of expense. Okay, cool. I got those taken care of. You should have another one where it just disappears from your bank account or your paycheck or whatever into some sacred account, right? And then when opportunities such as we're in right now, where the market, things are low, prices of things are low, people are desperate. And when people are desperate, they say, hey, I will give me my watch. I just need $100, whatever it is. His watch, his business, some kind of asset, some kind of equity. These things are cheap. That's when you pull out that money, because you don't want to pull it out from your 6 months of worth of retirement, right? You don't want to do that. You don't want to affect your long-term retirement money. You don't want to do that. But this sacred money, right, and the reason why it doesn't have to be much is because it's for a rainy day, and the rainy day might not come for a while. So don't worry about it being a lot of money, okay? Just a certain amount that you can every week disappear, and opportunities by definition will come through as the market cycle through, right? And that's when you want to have that extra $5,000, $10,000 to go into some particular opportunity in times when the market is down, and boom, you can ride the wave up again. So just a few points I just wanted to mention with regards to the question, but we can continue.
Form of leverage, but the hard part with capital is how do you obtain it? And that's why I talked about specific knowledge and accountability first. If you have specific knowledge in a domain, and if you're accountable and you have a good name in that domain, then people are going to give you capital as a form of leverage that you can use to then go get more capital. But capital also is fairly well understood, and I think a lot of the knocks against capitalism come because of the accumulation of capital. The most interesting and the most important form of leverage is this idea of products that have no marginal cost of replication. This is the new form of leverage. This was only invented in the last few hundred years. It got started with the printing press. It accelerated broadcast media.
Low marginal cost of replication basically means that YouTube, for example, right? How much does it cost YouTube to add one more video? This video that we're putting in right now, okay? One more video in their archive of, I don't know how many videos it gets uploaded a year, some ridiculous number, right? So the marginal cost here is referring to the cost of an additional video, let's say. And for something like YouTube, that's very, very, very low, right? It tends to be very true of digital things in general. Once you've created the MP3, how much does it cost to keep on copying it and sending it to your friends, right? There's some electricity involved, but it's super low, right? So now he's getting into newer forms of technologies. He talked about capital, which is a new form, which is a kind of technology, and that is a few thousand years old, and we're kind of wrapping our heads around that. But now there are newer forms of technology with low marginal cost of replication that we can also leverage.
And now it's really blown up with the internet and with code. So now you can multiply your efforts without having to involve other humans and without needing money from other humans. This podcast is a form of leverage. Long ago, I would have had to sit in a lecture hall and lecture each of you personally, and I would have maybe reached a few hundred people, and that would have been that. 30 years ago, I would have to be lucky to get on TV, which is somebody else's leverage. They would have distorted the message. They would have taken the economics out of it or charged me for it. They would have muddled the message, and I would have been lucky to get that form of leverage. But today, thanks to the internet, I can buy a cheap microphone, hook it up to a laptop or an iPad, and there you are, all listening. So this newest form of leverage is where all the
Or you could get a good microphone, thinks Dr. Thunder. It's like, no, don't get a cheap microphone. No.
new fortunes are made. So all the new billionaires. So the last generation fortunes were made by capital. That was the Warren Buffetts of the world. But the new generation fortunes are all made through code or media. Joe Rogan making 50 to 100 million bucks a year from his podcasts. PewDiePie, I don't know how much money he's rolling in, but he's bigger than the news, right? The Fortnite players. Of course, Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg and Larry Page and Sergey Brin and Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. That is all code-based leverage. Now, the beauty is when you combine all of these three. That's where tech startups really excel, where you take just the minimum but highest output labor that you can get, which are engineers and designers, product developers, and then you add in capital. You use that for marketing, advertising, scaling, and you add in lots of code and media and podcasts and content to get it all out there. That is a magic combination. And that's why you see technology startups explode out of nowhere, use massive leverage, and just make huge outsized returns.
Do you want to talk a little bit about permissioned versus permissionless?
Probably the most interesting thing to keep in mind about the new forms of leverage is they are permissionless. They don't require somebody else's permission for you to use them or succeed. For labor leverage, somebody has to decide to follow you. For capital leverage, somebody has to give you money to invest or to turn into a product. But coding, writing books, recording podcasts, tweeting, YouTubing, these kinds of things, these are permissionless. You don't need anyone's permission to do them. And that's why they're very egalitarian. They're great equalizers of leverage. And as much as people may rail on Facebook and YouTube, they're not going to stop using it because this permissionless leverage where everyone can be a broadcaster is just too.
So this is interesting. And of course, we're right now engaged in permissionless leverage, right? Using YouTube, other social media platforms to elevate in some way, to bring more shine on what it is that we're capable of doing in a way that is far more efficient than trying to do it one person at a time, or even that it would be over, I don't know, years of doing whatever that job is. I mean, you could still be totally unknown, but by using social media in doing the kind of stuff that we're doing right now, it kind of it's highly effective at doing that. I think we can be highly effective at generating leverage against current employment. So say you're working for whatever, and say your platform really starts to blow up, that has a value. That's and depending on if it's the sort of pariah kind of attention versus the sort of constructive kind of attention, it can be very, very valuable. It can totally change dynamics, change the reach that you have, tremendously. So anyhow.
So if I were to, because I'm trying to think about the continuity here in terms of these different things that you're leveraging, okay? You're leveraging capital, you're leveraging other people as well. And then I mentioned leveraging systems, okay? And systems typically, and that's why it's a system, they typically share the same attribute of having a low marginal cost of replication. A system of printing, for example, would be the printing press, for example, right? And once you have it set, you could just continue to print more and more, right? And this, whatever way, in other words, you can either make use of something like YouTube or other people's other form of media to have this permissionless and low cost associated with it, or what you are doing too, in anything that you're doing, right? It could be recording music and then selling it online, or actually making CDs, or freaking putting it on wax because people prefer it, or you're in some kind of service, whatever it may be, you do speaking gigs, whatever it is. Typically spend some time constantly thinking about what kind of system can I build around this stuff that'll just make it easier, that'll remove the cost of something that I'm doing, some amount of time that I'm spending doing something, I create a system and it reduce that marginal cost. And technology helps with that a lot. Again, this is a story about technology, and leveraging technology is what he's talking about. It just so turns out that technology in the electronic world has these inbuilt low barrier to entry, and in terms of the permissionlessness, and also low marginal cost to replicate. But we continue.
And I think about this too. I just did this Freedom Fest, and when I was out there, I picked something else up, which was an interview that I did for the sort of the video affiliate of Epoch Times. I don't know if folks know Epoch Times. Tends to be sort of a right-leaning, kind of conservative, kind of libertarian, free-thinking kind of publication, and Larry Elder, for instance, is one of the he does a video series for Epoch Times. But anyhow, I was interviewed by them. It was about 20 minutes, and when that's released, I'll let folks know. And I did this panel show, or panel with Larry Sharpe and TK Coleman, and it was very well received. And of course, I made a lot of connections and like that. But see, the thing is that none of that would have happened if I wasn't regularly online doing podcasting, doing live streaming, all the stuff, my conversations with Dr. Thunder series, all of that stuff. And it was permissionless, created that opportunity. It all created that opportunity. And so being able to actually leverage speaking gigs, based on my media presence, social media presence, and based on skills that I have continued to develop because of the consistent streaming and the communication skills. All of that stuff would not have been possible. Nobody would have known who I was at all. And they wouldn't have thought that a music professor would be interested in doing something like that, being involved in that kind of conference. So anyhow.
So obviously this harkens back to a lot of things that we talk about on this show, right? Because on this show is about getting ish done. And one of the episodes we did, we talked in depth about sweat equity. And it's not like you exactly know exactly what's going to come of things, okay? And this is to the overthinkers out there, or to the people who like to make direct connections. Like, I want to know the next step to take and the next outcome that it'll bring, okay? Well, you got to be a little bit more intuitive than that. And in this case, intuitive just means, hey, you don't know what's going to happen, okay? That's really all I'm saying is, there's a certain part of being intuitive just means you're very comfortable not knowing exactly what's going to happen, but you're like, okay, this is the general path. So the way I kind of think about it is you're planting seeds in the future. Like, you take this arrow, right? You put a bunch of grain seeds in it and you shoot it into the future, right? And in the general direction that you're walking towards, right? You don't know the kind of soil that is there, right? Some may land, there's a biblical thing about this, right? Some will land on the road, maybe some land in water, maybe some land in fertile soil, whatever. But you're walking in the general direction. You can't see, it's dark, there's fog, all this type of stuff, right? You're walking into your future. But it's your job to constantly pull out arrows out of your quiver. In this case, you're talking about developing skills, being online, blah, blah, blah. And you don't know what kind of soil is going to land in the future, but you got to keep on shooting it, okay? And you just constantly, you have to have this cycle. Depending on how long it takes for what you shoot out to mature, you have to be constantly on this cycle. Maybe it's every 2 years of pulling out another arrow, trying for another general area where you think things are going to go towards, and shoot it there. Sometimes you get there and maybe only a few things germinated. But sometimes you get there like, boom, wow, there's a whole field full of wheat here that I supposedly planted when I shot that arrow a few years ago. But anyways, wanted to repeat that little thing as we go along.
The same way, you can rail upon Apple for having a slightly closed ecosystem in the iPhone, but everyone's writing apps for it. And so as long as you can write apps for it, you can get rich or reach users doing that, why not? I think of all the forms of leverage, the best one in modern society, and people are this is glib, this is a little overused, and this is why I tell people learn to code, right? It's that we have this idea that in the future, there's going to be these robots and they're going to be doing everything. And that may be true, but I would say the majority of the robot revolution has already happened. The robots are already here, and there are way more robots than there are humans. It's just that we pack them in data centers for heat and efficiency reasons. We put them in servers, they're inside the computers, all the circuits, the robot mind inside that's doing all the work. And so every great software developer, for example, now has an army of robots working for him at nighttime while he or she sleeps after they've written the code, and it's just cranking away. So the robots army is already here. The robot revolution has already happened. We're about halfway through it. We're just adding in much more of the hardware component these days. As we get more familiar, we get more comfortable with the idea of autonomous vehicles and autonomous airplanes and autonomous ships and maybe autonomous trucks, and there's delivery bots and Boston Dynamics robots and all that. But robots who are doing web searching for you, for example, are already here. The ones who are like cleaning up your video and audio and transmitting it around the world are already here. The ones who are answering many customer service queries, things that you would have had to call a human for, are already here. So an army of robots is already here. It's very cheaply available. And the bottleneck is just figuring out intelligent and interesting things to do to them. And essentially, you can order this army of robots around. Just the commands have to be issued in a computer language, in the language that they understand. So these robots aren't very smart. They have to be told very precisely what to do and how to do it. So coding is such a great superpower because now you can speak the language of the robot armies and you can tell them what to do.
And I think at this point, actually, people are not only commanding the army of robots within servers through code. They're actually manipulating the movement of trucks, of other people. Just ordering a package on Amazon, you're manipulating the movement of many people and many robots to get a package delivered to you. People are doing the same things to build businesses now. So there's
Yeah, and just so that we are in track here with how powerful this technology, this particular technology, how powerful it has made us, is, if you just think back, okay, let's say 1940s, and you're trying to leverage the people and the capital and the resources to do some kind of massive effort, like, build these trains and then take some equipment in these trains, transfer it to the other side of Russia and whatever. For some reason, we're in Russia. We're in Russia in the 1940s, we're building trains and we're leveraging all these things. And then I'll think about what he's just describing in terms of the robots, which are in servers in your computer and also in these factories, let's say, and they're controlled by code. Where now, because you have these systems, one person can type something, write the right kind of code, perfect it, and then boom, you have automatic delivery trucks, which perhaps are not here yet, but you can imagine that happening. You have quote unquote robots, right, that are out there in terms of even little bits of code in data center that's replicating stuff. Robots, as he said, that's, reviewing this video, making sure everything is clean and then uploading it. It's not somebody like it would have been back in the day. So same things, all these tons and tons of stuff that need to move and need to be measured precisely and placed in precise locations and all that kind of stuff. And no human being needs to look at it. That is the massive leverage that technology of this sort is giving us, right? And again, with the low barrier to entry, permissionless in terms of you using other people's, like you typing into Google, for example, and using all their quote unquote robots. I mean, can you imagine how powerful that actually is compared to that person in 1940 trying to find out what a catalytic converter is, right? For you, that's like you could watch 10,000 YouTube videos right now on your couch on catalytic converters. But anyways.
Army of robots within servers, and then there's also an army of actual robots and people that are being manipulated through software.
Labor and capital are much less egalitarian, not just in their inputs, but in their outputs. Let's say that I need something that humans have to provide, like if I want a massage or if I need like someone to cook my food. The more of a human element there is in providing that service, the less egalitarian it is. Jeff Bezos probably has much better vacations than most of us, right? Because he has lots of humans running around doing whatever he needs to do. But if you look at the output of code and media, Jeff Bezos doesn't get to watch better movies and TV than we do. Jeff Bezos doesn't get to even have a better computing experience. Like Google doesn't give him some premium special Google account where his searches are better. It's the nature of code and media output that the same product is accessible to everybody. And it turns into a positive sum game, where if Jeff Bezos is consuming the same product as 1,000 other people, that product's to be better than the version that Jeff would consume on his own. Whereas with other products, that's not true. If you look at something like buying a Rolex, which is no longer about telling time, it's a signaling good. It's all about showing off, I have a Rolex. That's a zero-sum game. If everybody in the world is wearing a Rolex, then people don't want to wear Rolexes anymore because they no longer signal. It's canceled out the effect. And so rich people do have an advantage in consuming that product. They'll just price it up till only they can have Rolexes, and then poor people can't have Rolexes, and Rolexes resume their signaling value. But something like watching Netflix or using Google or using Facebook or YouTube, or even, frankly, modern day cars. Like rich people don't have better cars. They just have weirder cars. You can't drive a Lamborghini on the street at any speed that makes sense for a Lamborghini. So it's actually a worse car on the street. It just turned into a signaling good at that point. Your sweet spot where you want to be is somewhere like a Tesla Model 3 or like a Toyota Corolla. It's an amazing car. A new Toyota Corolla is a really nice car. But because it's mainstream, the technology has amortized the cost of production over the largest number of consumers possible. And the best products tend to be at the center, at the sweet spot, the middle class, rather than being targeted at the upper class. So I think one of the things that we don't necessarily appreciate in modern society is as the forms of leverage have gone from being human-based, labor-based, and being capital-based to being more product and code and media-based, that most of the goods and services that we consume are becoming much more egalitarian in their consumption. Even
Egalitarian in their consumption, and also be one of the things that he mentioned about, well, if more people are consuming something, it tends to be better. That's a thing that. Well, let me ask you. Do you what does that say to you? More people are consuming something, it's gonna be better. What do you say to that general argument? Obviously, it's a general argument.
Better for who? Better for the company?
No, just objectively better. That this would be a better piece of technology, right? This would be
Okay, so if more
Yeah.
people think it's useful, then or it's more effective or more advanced or improves an aspect of their life that they found.
it's going to be
in-
functionally, objectively better if it's targeted at the masses as opposed to targeted at three
like a
guys.
dishwasher or something.
Yeah, like a dishwasher targeted at the masses versus it's just made for you. The one that's just made for you, it's not going to be as the one that's made for the masses. That's over time, right?
Well,
It has to do with partly with manufacture. So you know why when VCR first came out, it was very expensive, and then it gets cheaper, right? A big part of that is not just some simple market forces. It's the manufacturing process just constantly gets better and better and better,
Yep.
right? So number one, they're able to make it cheaper, and then number two, they start improving it in all kinds of ways because of all kinds of market feedback. And then comes in the competition, right? Another VCR person wants to take that market.
Yeah.
Now, but if I'm just making it for you, and by the way, if I'm just making it for you, it tends to be more like a I have it and you don't type deal, right? So as a matter of fact, it doesn't even really have to be good. Like, you know what I mean? Like, as long as this is just a one-time thing. And how do I even know if it's really good? Unless, everyone else is having it and using it. Manufacturers are learning how to make it better because they're making thousands and thousands and thousands and more and improving the processes, making it cheaper. Competition comes in. So generally speaking, when something is targeted at the high at the middle class, the same thing with the reason, by the way, one of the reasons why computers are getting smaller, chips are getting smaller and smaller, but more powerful. It's purely a manufacturing thing. There's a law, I forget what the law is, right? That says every 18 months, blah, blah, blah. Obviously, it's not written in stone, right? That's going to be exactly 18 months. The chip gets smaller, but increases in power. A huge part of that is, we're just making billions of chips. And guess what? You're going to get
better at it.
Exactly. I don't care what you're making, Dr. Thunder. If you make billions of it, you're going to get better at it. Okay, let's play a little bit more. Go ahead.
Let me say this because I was thinking. So okay. So are we including? So this is really interesting. So let's talk about guitars, for instance. All right. So now we know that there are certain guitars that they have a certain look, and everyone recognizes that guitar. Probably the one that's most recognized by people is a Fender Stratocaster.
Yep.
Okay, so it has a certain look. Now it's been copied like crazy. Everybody makes a model instrument that is modeled after the Fender Stratocaster. Okay, and then you have probably the second most recognizable is probably a Les Paul.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and same kind of thing. Everybody has copied the Les Paul, right? Because it's such a iconic instrument. Everybody wants that instrument. It has certain features on it. You get used to. You learn how to play on an instrument that is a certain kind of instrument. You want another one that's similar. Whatever. Okay. But then there are all these luthiers that make custom instruments. Now, some folks will argue that the custom-made stuff, which is more, it's not mass-produced, right? It's like handmade, and then therefore is better. So where's the sort of where's the intersection between something being handmade and then therefore more care taken, and something being perfected because it's had more feedback?
Yeah, Dr. Thunder. Hold on one second. Let me address something here real quick while I play this video.
Food is becoming that way. Like, food is becoming cheap and abundant, at least in the first world, too much so to our detriment. Jeff Bezos isn't necessarily eating better food. He's just eating different food, or he's eating like food that's prepared and served theatrically. So it's almost like more of, again, that human element performance. But the labor element out of food production has gone down massively. The capital element has gone down massively. And so even food production itself has become more technology oriented. And so the gap between the haves and the have-nots is getting smaller. So if you care about ethics in wealth creation, it is better to create your wealth using code and media as leverage.
We're going to say something?
No, I was just, so where's the intersection between the handmade stuff, and you could argue that maybe it actually is better, and the stuff that's been perfected. So where's the intersection between those?
100%. I would suspect that you would then go into, in other words, there's certain types of goods, certain types of services, right? There are different types of goods and different types of services. And this particular factor here, which is handmade, handcrafted, especially, best craftsman just made this one thing for me versus mass produced, is going to vary from quote unquote thing to thing. There are such things like, let's say, Netflix, or let's say a good movie, right? That as a matter of fact, perhaps mass produced in terms of, lots of movies, a big market, it's probably better to get out good quality, right? Right.
Plus,
Game of Thrones.
Plus, there's
exactly
more money to pay all the people that have to work on the film.
Exactly. And I think,
and all that.
Yeah. So that's an incentive structure, right? So it's like, hey, I'm incentivized to bring in the best directors, the best people, blah, 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 because we're actually going to make more money if we do it mass versus making a movie for this one billionaire guy, right? We just wants this one, that kind of a thing. So people are incentivized to do that. However, there's certain markets, like let's say art, okay? Collector's items, like, crazy type Les Paul guitars, okay? That's not going to benefit from the mass thing. There is no financial incentive. There is no real demand, as a matter of fact, okay? And I think the art, so I think that if you look at segment by segment and look at incentives, I think you could start to break it down. I don't know. Is that a good crack at it?
Yeah, no. I was just pointing it out because obviously it's not a one size fits all thing.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps we could argue that the luthier, the person that's making a one of a kind item, is actually greatly benefited from the mass produced items. He's taking the mass produced item as the sort of, okay, I'm going to make a guitar based on this, but then he's just improving aspects of it, and he's, so maybe it's not really a.
And here's another thing. When you look at the economy as a whole, at large, arming the masses with these types of things that they can leverage, like products especially products that are productive, means of production, such as Google and YouTube and whatnot, means of marketing, right? That overall is better for the economy than, giving Google to Jeff Bezos only, right?
Right.
Because you don't know. It just doesn't make any sense to be like, I don't know what geniuses are in some corner of Philly somewhere. So from that standpoint, that is the standpoint of the entire economy and growth. Yes, the masses, mass type stuff. That would be an interesting thing. Like, I'm just sitting here thinking now. I'm picturing some charts and maps of like the question you asked, right? Where is the sweet spot for mass production? Where's the sweet spot for this? And what are the factors that affect it? Blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Spend a little bit more, then we'll land the plane, sir.
Leverage. because then those products are equally available to everybody, as opposed to trying to create your wealth through labor or capital. Because what I'm referring to here is scale economies. Technology products and media products have such amazing scale economies that you always want to use the product that is used by the most people. The one that's used by the most people ends up having the largest budget. There's no marginal cost of adding another user. And so with the largest budget, you get the highest quality. So the best TV shows are actually not going to be some obscure ones just made for a few rich people. They're going to be the big budget ones like the Game of Thrones or the Breaking Bad or Bird Box, where they have massive, massive budgets. They can just use those budgets to get to a certain quality level. And then the rich people, to be different, they have to fly to Sundance and watch a documentary, because you and I aren't going to fly to Sundance because, that's something that...
And that will be the signaling. And by the way, signaling will be a big factor in our chart that we're talking about, right? In the sense that people still have a need for status, okay? I just mean human beings, right? Part of the whole human social game is going to be a need for status. So even if they can watch better films on Netflix than they do at Sundance, they got to fly to Sundance, right? Because that's the thing to do. And, maybe you could get better jazz at your local spot where Dr. Thunder plays. But you got to go to the weird avant-garde place where, the music is super crappy, but it's, I don't know what names to put out there, but it was the place to be seen in the avant-garde jazz, whatever, in Paris, right? And that becomes a status thing. So mass will never replace the need for status, right? It's completely opposite. So you're like, oh, mass produced is better, but still people are going to want that specially crafted, one-of-a-kind type thing, right? Whether it be a festival or a watch, because we need to be in special clubs, right?
Right.
So, ladies and gentlemen, again, cheap leverage, this is where we ended. Cheap leverage, starting with the leverage of accountability, the leverage of the entrepreneur, the leverage of you putting your name on the dotted line, taking the risk. Right? And it's another way of looking at it is just you kill what you eat. You are responsible for bringing in X. And when you're responsible, you get the reward. If there is no accountability there, right? No responsibility there, you don't get the reward. So it's a good way of leveraging, being accountable. Think of yourself as accountable, right? I'm going to put my name on the dotted line. I'm going to put my risk out there. I'm going to build a brand out there. I'm going to put myself out there as Dr. Thunder, right? And put that brand around it. And if something good comes of it, I reap the benefits, right? And in terms of teams as well, it's best that teams have accountability. They work better that way. If you're building a startup, rather than be like, hey, I just have a group of friends, they're smart, let's all just come together and just figure this thing out. Well, great. But give them each a nice little silo that they are responsible for. Work out better that way, and people are accountable for the mistakes and accountable for the good things as well. Okay. And then we went into the cheapest kind of shall we say leverage. Let's say, and obviously you have to get all of them correct, like get the capital correct, get your own personal accountability thing correct, get some labor correctly. But then now you're going to add in the rocket fuel, which is all these cheap stuff, low barrier to entry, low permissionless, as he likes to call it, such as using Google, what we're doing right now, right? We're using Google, which is YouTube, to put out information out there. And for YouTube, this is a very low cost, additional cost. Doesn't cost them anything to add this one there. And it's cheap for us, right? And in general, thinking about this power that technology has is a way for you to think through whatever it is you're doing. How do I create systems using these robots, right? These digital robots to help to push things much further than they could otherwise go with just pure capital and labor leveraging. But final thoughts there, Dr. Thunder.
Yeah, so good conversation. Folks should go back and listen to the first 2 or 3 episodes that we did on this, which I thought were all really good conversations. A week before last week, we were supposed to have one last week, and I got caught up in some travel stuff and everything else. But something that's very cool that's about to happen is tomorrow Ike is going to be on Thunder's Thoughts, and this is what we're going to be dealing with, this topic right here. And so we're going to talk about hypertension. Turns out that the cause of Kevin's death was hypertension. He was on blood pressure medication, and he was working crazy. And I know Ike loves it when we talk about work and home life balance and all that. So we'll.
And it'll be interesting. A very good conversation, because there is much to be said about, well, where do you draw the line, right? Where do you draw the line? And I'm going to stick to my guns, right? In the sense that, like, everything I said about you having to kill the inner bee inside and go conquer the world is 100%. I'm not changing any of that, but obviously it's going to be in the subtleties. Okay. It's in the subtleties that people can make mistakes, right? And if I may give one, there's subtleties, but there's also, if you're in an area, okay, where you have if your neuroticism is fairly high, and this is just a attribute that everybody has. Everyone has a level of neuroticism. That is what's the sensitivity to negative emotion, right? If your sensitivity to negative emotion is high, and you're working in an area where you're constantly being triggered, okay, that's one thing. All right, because we're talking about health here, okay, and we're talking about the level of take away the hours, okay. I don't care if you're putting in. You take two people. Both are putting in 16-hour days, but one is in an area where there's a whole lot of oxytocin, serotonin. The hormones are just shooting up and down constantly. Why? Because they're getting triggered because of the kind of work they do. Right now, Kevin was in that domain, right? Where now I don't. And by the way, I'm doing armchair psychology here, and it may be completely out of place, but I noticed that there's no nice way to put it. He's a little neurotic, right? So let me be controversial and say that. And by that, I'm using a technical term here, okay? He has a high neuroticism, right? And I get it. I have a little bit of that too, meaning he just gets irritated, okay? So I can imagine myself having to talk to these freaking people, like all day. So I'm saying, hey, it's not the hours. I could sit down, okay, solving puzzles for 16 hours and sleep like it. Perfect, but you could take all the measurements in my body, everything is perfect. But 16 hours talking to some crazy people, it might be a little different. I don't know. That's just a taste, ladies and gentlemen, of the kinds of things that we'll be talking about.
What the show is going to be about. So and we're going to have the show a little bit later than usual. Thunderstart a little bit later than usual because I have a gig. I've got a gig earlier, and I'm not going to be able to be in front of the computer until about 10:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So that'll be the start time of the show tomorrow. But really looking forward to that. And then also we've got a really great Case Closed, which will be on Ike's channel this coming Sunday, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we also have a good topic for that too. We won't reveal that right now, but it's going to be a good show. The Case Closed has been happening. Folks need to come and check it out.
Folks need to come and check it out. All right, Case Closed, and then tomorrow on Dr. Thunder's channel. But right before Dr. Thunder's channel, I'm going to be here again, okay, with Aitois, and we're going to be talking some economic news as we do every Thursday. But until then, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank you. Thank you very much for those who clicked the like button. I see a fair number of likes in here. Well, what exactly is it? We got 28, which is not bad. Okay. And Ike, you think you can hit the topic on addiction? Interesting, because that is part of what I'm going to touch on it in our talk tomorrow, Dr. Thunder. It kind of came into mind in terms of because I think it does come into play, because I think that, and again, this is me doing a certain type of I'm going outside of my comfort zone here to do armchair type armchair quarterbacking, armchair psychologizing, armchair medical doctor crap. Now it's about what I'm going to do. If I watch Kevin's old videos, I used to see him always drinking Coca-Cola, especially like the bottled ones, right? You will see him in his old studio, blah blah, real old ones, and he'll have his Coca-Cola, drinking it. And I think that he was finally able to quit that, but then he replaced it with something else, which we all know what it was, Red Bull, right? And that'll get you. That'll get, certain things of that nature. But overall, Leroy, yes, I'll probably hit a topic on addiction coming soon, because it's right up my wheelhouse in terms of the types of things I like to think about, types of things I like to do. So 100%. And also, I'm going to be doing a show soon, maybe within the next week, on charm versus charisma. Another thing which is kind of right up my wheelhouse. These are two means of irrationally influencing people, right? But they're very different, okay? Charm is Bill Clinton, and charm typically has to do with something that's evocative, like something you're doing, the way they talk, the way they sound, the way they walk, the way they slap your back, right? The way they look. Charming. He is charming. Very kind of external stuff. But someone that has charisma, they could just walk in the room and not say anything, and people would just follow them. It's a different thing. It's more internal. It's more a sense of authenticity that you see. You see, with the Bill Clinton type, he doesn't have to be authentic, okay, to be charming. That's what I'm saying. You don't necessarily have to be authentic to be charming. You just got to say the right things, right? And people will, like, such as flattery, for example, it always works. They're not like, is this guy really? It's like, it always works. But charisma is about authenticity, and people can sense that before you say two words, okay? And we'll talk about how they can sense it. We'll talk about how typically you're not blessed with both. That's kind of how life is. You're not going to be ultimately charismatic and also ultimately charming. As a matter of fact, they tend to be kind of opposite from each other, because to be very, very authentic tends to be you don't care so much about charm, right? Like, if you're super authentic and therefore charismatic and people will follow you, it tends to be the case that you're not so charming. So again, irrational ways, by that I mean these are not rational ways, right? You're not arguing people to influence them. They're just drawn emotionally to you. One is charm, one is charisma. There are ways so we're going to distinguish between both, ways of developing both, knowing which one you're strong in, knowing the downsides of whatever you're strong in, and then maximizing the other side. Again, charm versus charisma. I was chilling and drinking some wine the other day, and I thought about that. I was like, that'd be a nice little dichotomy. But anyways, ladies and gentlemen, we are gone, I think, if I can find the click thing here, or something. Peace.
In the den of iniquity, vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment, what a pity. Tomorrow never certain, what draws behind the curtain, the face of evil smirking with that shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble, that either pop or topple, many will fall and stumble, let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso, cannons will breach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. I say, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.